The iron doors groaned open, spilling torchlight across the frozen stones. My knees scraped as the guards shoved me forward, my breath catching in sharp bursts that misted in the air. I should not have been here. Humans who crossed the northern border did not return. Everyone knew that. Yet here I was, dragged before the throne of the Alpha King. The chamber was carved of black granite, vast and echoing with silence. Flames flickered in wolf-shaped braziers, throwing shadows that leapt like hunters on the walls. And there, seated upon a throne of antlers and stone, was him, the Alpha King. His golden eyes burned through the dimness, locking on me as if I were prey. His stillness was more terrifying than any snarl, a silence that spoke of absolute power, human. He said, his voice rumbling like the earth before an avalanche, "You crossed my borders." My throat tightened. It was a mistake. I didn't know. He cut me off with a raised hand. "Ignorance does not save you. The law is death." A cold wave surged through me. Death, for a wrong step, for being lost. My fists clenched despite the tremor in them. "That's not justice. That's slaughter." The corner of his mouth curved into a dangerous smile. "You have spirit. Most would beg. You fight." His footsteps were soundless as he descended from the throne. Circling me, he leaned close, his presence crushing, as if the air itself bent to his will. "Perhaps I will give you another way." I forced myself to meet his eyes, though every instinct screamed to look away. "What way?" "One night," he said, his voice low, deadly. "In my presence, in my chambers. If you endure until dawn, I will spare your life." The guards shifted, shocked into silence. My heart slammed against my ribs. One night, survive him, and yet, it was the only chance. I remembered my grandmother's words as she pressed the silver pendant into my hand. "Silver protects, but wisdom saves." I drew in a shaking breath. "One night," I whispered, "and if I survive, you swear I walk free." The Alpha King's eyes gleamed like fire-catching gold. "You have my word." He extended his hand. My fingers trembled as they met his, heat seared through me, a jolt like lightning. "Then come," he said. "Night approaches," and with that, my trial began. The iron doors shuddered as they opened, spilling flickers of firelight across the frozen stone floor. The sound echoed like the growl of some hidden beast, each reverberation crawling down my spine. My wrists burned from the grip of the guards who dragged me forward, their claws just short of piercing my skin. Every step scraped against the ground, knees weak, breath shallow. A thin cloud of frost rose with every exhale, dissolving in the cold air as quickly as the fragile hope I clung to. I shouldn't have been there. Every story, every warning spoken by trembling lips back home said the same thing. No human returned once they crossed into the Alpha King's territory. We all knew the rules, but I had been careless, foolish enough to wander too far, blind to the invisible line drawn across the mountains. One wrong step, and now I stood at the threshold of judgment. The chamber swallowed me whole as they pulled me inside. Black granite stretched high above, polished smooth as if it had been carved by centuries of storms. Flames leapt in great stone bowls shaped like wolves, their light casting shadows that twisted and stalked along the walls. At the end of the vast hall, raised on a platform of antlers and bone, sat the figure who had haunted whispered legends and immortal, carved from strength itself. The Alpha King. His stillness was worse than any snarl. He did not need to bare teeth or roar. His silence was command enough. Amber eyes glowed from the darkness, unblinking, piercing, as though they could strip away skin and secrets alike. He leaned forward slightly, his broad shoulders cloaked in fur that shimmered with the fire's reflection. Human. His voice thundered, carrying through the hall like an unbroken vow. "You crossed my borders." The words struck harder than the guards' fists ever could. My lips parted, the excuse tumbling out before I could stop it. "I didn't know." I never meant. His hand rose, and my voice died in my throat. "Ignorance is not protection. You stand here guilty. The punishment is death." The word hung between us like a blade. My heart hammered against my ribs, a rhythm so loud I feared it betrayed me to the wolves who flanked the walls. Death, so simple, so absolute. All for a wrong turn on a mountain trail. I should have begged, but fire rose in me instead. Too sudden, too wild. "That isn't justice," I whispered, my voice shaking yet sharp. That's cruelty. A low sound escaped him, not anger, but something far more dangerous, amusement. His mouth curved into a smile that revealed no warmth, only promise. He rose from his throne with a predator's grace, each step measured, silent, inevitable. He circled me, his presence coiling like smoke, suffocating, inescapable. You have spirit, he murmured, his breath grazing my ear. Most humans collapse. They weep, they beg. Yet you argue. I forced myself not to flinch. Would begging save me? He chuckled softly, a sound like rolling thunder. No. The guards shifted uneasily as their king came to stand before me once more. His eyes studied me, not with hunger but with calculation, like a hunter deciding whether prey was worth the chase. Perhaps there is another way, my pulse leapt. Another way. One night, he said at last, his voice low and deliberate. You will spend one night in my presence, in my chambers. If you endure until dawn, your life is yours to claim. Fail, and death will be swifter than mercy. A hush fell over the chamber, so thick even the flames seemed to freeze. One night, just one night. My body ached from fear already. How could I survive the weight of him? The power radiating from every breath he drew? It was no bargain. It was torment disguised as choice. And yet, it was the only path that did not end instantly in blood. I thought of my grandmother, the way she had pressed a small pendant into my hand on her final day. The silver chain rested cold against my skin now, hidden beneath the layers of dirt and fear. Silver protects, child, but wisdom saves, she had said. Wisdom. I was beginning to understand. I straightened, though my knees quivered. If I survive, I said, my voice trembling but unbroken, you swear I walk free. His eyes gleamed, something flickering in them, surprise, or perhaps respect. You have my word, he said, each syllable heavy as stone. I am Alpha King. He extended his hand. Heat radiated from him like fire, burning against the icy air. I hesitated, then placed my trembling fingers in his palm. A surge of energy shot through me, a spark that threatened to shatter bone and soul alike. Come, he said, his voice as steady as the mountain. Night approaches. The guards stepped back, bowing their heads as the doors thundered closed behind us. My heart pounded as he led me down corridors lined with carved wolves, their stone eyes watching, judging. Whispers followed us, shock, disbelief, maybe even pity. I kept my head high, though every step echoed with the knowledge that the sun might never rise for me again. The Alpha King's chambers awaited. The trial of night had begun. Asterisk. The doors to his chambers opened with a sound like thunder rolling through stone, and I stepped into a world I had not expected. It was not the savage den my imagination had conjured. No blood, no bones, no trophies of conquests past. Instead, the room stretched wide and high, walls carved with intricate patterns that glimmered faintly in the firelight. A massive hearth roared with flames, the warmth spilling across fur-lined floors and polished stone. Towering shelves lined one wall, filled with books bound in leather, some titles scrawled in scripts I could not read. On the opposite side, windows taller than two men revealed a black sky pricked with icy stars. The mountains looming like silent sentinels beyond the glass dot. At the center stood the bed, enormous, carved from dark wood that seemed to have grown from the earth itself, draped in furs that looked softer than snow yet heavier than chains. It was a place meant to dwarf anyone who dared step near it. My chest tightened at the sight. This was not merely a chamber, it was a throne room of its own kind, designed to remind anyone who entered that they were small. And he was not. He released my hand, the searing imprint of his touch lingering on my skin, and moved with unhurried grace toward a table of dark stone. 2 glasses waited there, and he poured amber liquid into both before offering one to me. His eyes studied my hesitation as I took it. Drink, he said, his tone not unkind but laced with command. I lifted the glass, inhaling the smoky sweetness. The warmth burned down my throat, chasing the frost that had lodged in my chest. My hand steadied, if only slightly. He watched, silent, and I knew this too was part of the test. Would I defy, or would I endure? You wonder why I bother, he said at last, his voice low and steady, filling every corner of the chamber. Why I do not simply end your life and be done. He set his glass down with a soft click, his eyes narrowing. Perhaps it is because I have grown tired of predictability. Humans who stumble here always beg. They weep, they crumble, they break before the first strike is ever dealt. But you, he circled me slowly, his presence a storm pressing in on every side. You speak of justice to a king who has no need of it. You hold my gaze when wiser creatures turn away. You were silver without fear. My hand moved instinctively to the pendant at my chest, fingers brushing over the familiar cool metal. His eyes followed the motion, narrowing further. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his tone sharper now, edged with something I could not name. "It was my grandmother's," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "She told me it would protect me." For the first time, his composure faltered. He stepped closer with a suddenness that stole my breath, his hand hovering inches from the pendant, but never touching it. "Do you even know what you carry?" I shook my head, the weight of his stare threatening to crush me. His lips curled not in amusement, but in something far more dangerous. "Protection, yes, but also memory. That mark is older than your people remember, older than mine." The fire snapped loudly behind us, but I barely heard it over the pounding of my heart. "What does it mean?" His eyes glowed brighter, flecks of gold sparking in the amber. "It means you are not as ordinary as you believe." The words struck harder than his judgment had. Ordinary had been my only shield, my excuse for mistakes and weaknesses. Now it was stripped away, replaced with a question too vast to answer. Before I could speak, a wave of pressure rolled off him, invisible but crushing. My knees buckled as the air thickened, my lungs straining as though drowning on land. Heat radiated from his body, not warmth but fire, wild and untamed. This was the power of an alpha, not just flesh and strength but something deeper, primal, ancient. My vision blurred, black spots dancing at the edges. I clutched the pendant desperately, the cool silver biting against my palm. The weight eased, just slightly, enough for me to drag in a ragged breath. His expression had not changed, calm, composed, unreadable, but I saw the flicker of interest in his gaze. "You endure more than most," he murmured. "But the night has only begun." I swallowed, forcing my voice through the tremor. "If you think I'll collapse before dawn, you're wrong." Something like a smile ghosted across his face, brief and dangerous. "We shall see." He turned away, stoking the fire with a single effortless motion. Sparks flew upward, dancing like stars before fading into ash. The room seemed darker when they vanished, shadows stretching longer, deeper. The hours stretched before me like an endless road, and every part of me understood this was no simple night. It was trial by fire, by fear, by secrets older than memory. And as the flames cracked in the hearth and his golden eyes pinned me once more, I knew the night would test not only my body, but my very soul. The trial was no longer about survival alone. It was about discovery, and I wasn't certain which was more dangerous. The fire had burned low, its flames no longer leaping, but coiling in restless embers that threw shadows across the chamber walls. I sat rigid near the hearth, every muscle taut, my hands clutching the pendant as though it were the only thing keeping me tethered to the world. Hours had passed, or perhaps only moments, I could no longer tell. Time was beginning to blur, stretched thin beneath the weight of his presence. The Alpha King had not spoken for what felt like an eternity. He paced the room with a patience that chilled me more than any display of temper could have. His steps were soundless, yet I felt each one, as if the very stones trembled beneath his command. When his gaze fell on me, it was as though the air itself thickened, daring me to falter. "Your kind is fragile," he said suddenly, his voice shattering the silence like a blade drawn from its sheath. He stopped at the far side of the room, his eyes glowing brighter than the fire. "Your hearts fail, your minds break. It takes so little to unravel you." And yet, his head tilted slightly, as though I were some puzzle he could not quite solve. "You endure." The words carried no softness. They were not praise, but observation, heavy and unyielding. I forced myself to meet his gaze. "Maybe fragility isn't weakness," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Maybe it's proof that we fight harder to survive." The corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile. A human lecturing a king of wolves. Bold, reckless, he moved closer, the firelight catching in the dark strands of his hair. But perhaps not entirely wrong, before I could reply, a sudden pressure pressed against my chest, invisible yet suffocating. My breath hitched as the weight doubled, tripled, crushing down on my ribs. My vision swam, stars bursting behind my eyes. My knees buckled, and I dropped to the floor, the stone cold against my palms. "Do you feel it?" His voice came from everywhere and nowhere, curling through my skull like smoke. "The force that breaks mortals. The presence that no human can withstand." I gasped, clawing for air, my fingers tightening around the pendant. Heat surged from it, not burning but alive, a pulse that answered my desperation. A sudden image flashed before my eyes, shadows of wolves beneath a silver moon. A woman standing among them with the same pendant blazing at her throat. Her face was blurred, but her stance was unyielding, a lone figure against the tide. The vision shattered as quickly as it came, leaving me trembling on the floor, sweat chilling against my skin. I lifted my head to find him watching me, expression unreadable, though his eyes burned with something sharper now, recognition. "What did you see?" he asked. I hesitated, unsure if speaking would damn me further, but the truth spilled out before I could stop it. A woman. She wore this. She stood among wolves. She wasn't afraid. Silence stretched long between us. He crouched in front of me, his movements impossibly fluid, his gaze piercing through me as if searching for the echo of that vision in my soul. "Your blood remembers," he murmured. "Even if you do not." I wanted to ask what he meant, but his hand lifted, hovering near the pendant again. This time, his fingers brushed the silver, and a spark leapt through the air, sharp enough to make me flinch. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "This is no trinket of comfort. It binds you to something greater, something your kind has long forgotten." My pulse raced, fear and curiosity tangling, until I could no longer tell them apart. "Then tell me," I demanded, my voice raw. "What is it?" His gaze hardened. "Not yet." The weight of the answer pressed heavier than the silence that followed. He rose again, towering over me, his shadow stretching long across the floor. "If you survive this night, perhaps you will learn. If not, then the secret dies with you." I dragged myself back to my feet, the pendant still warm against my chest. My body trembled with exhaustion, but my resolve burned hotter than before. Whatever this night held, it was no longer just about survival. It was about unlocking the truth hidden in the fragments of memory my blood had carried forward. He turned his back to me, as though he had already decided I would endure more. "Rest while you can," he said, his tone neither kind nor cruel. "The night is long, and dawn is far away." But I knew there would be no rest. My heart thundered with the knowledge that I carried something ancient, something that bound me to this place, to him, to a history I had never been told. And as the fire dimmed and shadows closed in, I understood. The real trial was only just beginning. The fire had burned itself into a bed of glowing embers, shadows crawling along the walls like living things. I sat rigid in the silence, the weight of exhaustion pressing hard against my bones. But sleep was impossible. His presence filled the chamber as much as the air I breathed, heavy and unrelenting, every heartbeat echoing like a drum against my ribs. I had thought myself afraid before, but fear had changed its shape. It was no longer a sharp blade against my throat. Now it was a slow, crushing weight, one that threatened to grind me down into nothing. The Alpha King stood near the window, his silhouette carved against the star-flooded night. He hadn't spoken in some time, but silence with him was never empty. It was a coil, a waiting storm, a pause that promised the strike to come. When at last he turned from the window, his golden eyes caught the faint light, burning brighter than the hearth behind me. "You hold yourself together longer than I expected," he said, his tone unreadable. "Most would have fallen already." "I won't break," I whispered, though my voice trembled with fatigue. His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "We shall see." The pressure came without warning. One moment I was standing, the next the air thickened into chains, invisible yet crushing. My chest tightened as though an unseen hand had closed around my lungs. The world tilted, sound dimming to a dull roar in my ears. I dropped to my knees, palms flat against the cold stone floor, fighting to pull in even the smallest breath. "This is the truth of what you face." His voice thundered, closer now though I hadn't seen him move. "The weight of an alpha's power. It is not claws or fangs that end lives, it is this. the force of our existence. No mortal can bear it for long. His words pressed as heavily as the force itself, every syllable adding to the weight that bore me down. My vision blurred, stars breaking into my sight. I clutched at the pendant, the only anchor I had left. It burned against my palm, heat flooding up my arm until it seemed to thrum in rhythm with my own racing pulse. A voice not mine, not his, whispered in the back of my mind, faint and fleeting, "Stand, do not yield." I staggered, fighting to rise. My legs shook beneath me, the stone floor threatening to swallow me whole. But I pushed upward inch by inch. When I finally lifted my head, his gaze locked on mine, sharp and unflinching. For the first time, something flickered across his face, not amusement, not calculation, but surprise. "You should not be able to stand," he said quietly. "Maybe you don't know everything." I forced out, my voice hoarse but steady. His jaw tightened, and in the dim glow of the embers, I saw a shadow of something deeper in his eyes, memory, maybe even recognition. He stepped closer, the weight of his presence following him like a storm. "Your blood carries echoes," he murmured. "It remembers things your mind does not. That pendant is not just silver, it binds you to an oath older than these walls." I swallowed hard, every nerve screaming for answers. "Then tell me what I am." His silence stretched long, broken only by the crackle of the dying fire. At last, he spoke, each word low and deliberate. "You are a reminder of alliances your kind has forgotten, of debts not yet paid. That pendant once marked those who stood beside us, not against us." The truth struck harder than the weight of his power. My grandmother's words came rushing back. "Silver protects, but wisdom saves." Perhaps it had not been only comfort she had passed down, but inheritance. The Alpha King's gaze sharpened, his voice rougher now. "But whether you are heir to strength or simply to memory, the night will decide. Survive me, and perhaps you are more than fragile flesh. Fail, and you will prove yourself unworthy of what you carry." The invisible weight lifted all at once, leaving me gasping, drenched in sweat, trembling from head to toe. My body screamed for rest, but my spirit burned hotter than before. I had glimpsed something in his words, a thread of connection between worlds I had been taught were forever apart. And I knew then that this night was no longer only about life and death. It was about proving that what had been forgotten could rise again. He turned back toward the embers, his shoulders broad and unyielding in the dim light. "The dawn is not yet near," he said without looking at me, "and the night will not grow easier. If you cannot endure what comes next, you will not live to see the sun." My chest ached with every breath, but I lifted my chin, refusing to let the silence swallow me. "Then I'll endure," I said, "no matter what you throw at me." For a moment, he was still, then his head tilted slightly, as though weighing me against some unseen scale. The faintest edge of a smile curved his lips, sharp as the blade of a knife. "We shall see," he whispered, and in his voice was the promise of trials yet to come. The embers hissed and cracked, shadows shifting along the walls, and I knew the true breaking point had not yet arrived. The night was far from over, and its darkest hours still lay ahead. The chamber felt colder than it had before, though the embers in the hearth still glowed faintly. The weight of silence stretched on, broken only by the rasp of my own breath. My body ached from the invisible force he had unleashed upon me, my legs trembling from the strain of standing against it. Yet beneath the exhaustion, a strange steadiness had taken root in me, a flame that refused to be smothered. No matter how hard the night pressed down, the Alpha King had not moved for a long while. He stood with his back to me, broad shoulders framed by the glow of the window where the stars bled silver light into the room. His stillness was not restful. It was the silence of someone holding a battle within themselves, one I could not see but could feel in the heavy air. At last, he turned. His eyes glowed faintly, golden with something sharper than anger, deeper than curiosity. He studied me as though I were a riddle that did not belong in the world he had known. "You should have broken," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying an edge that cut through the room. "Even now, you stand." I drew in a breath, every word tasting of defiance. "Maybe you underestimate me." A flicker crossed his face, gone as quickly as it appeared. "Or perhaps I overestimate what fragility means," he said. He stepped closer, his shadow reaching me before he did. "But the night is not finished. Do you understand that?" I nodded, though my body screamed for rest. My pulse quickened, not only from fear, but from the knowledge that whatever came next would push me further than I had ever gone before. He circled me slowly, his presence coiling tighter with every step. This trial is not only about endurance, it is about truth. The weight you carry is not your own, it is the weight of promises made long before you drew breath. The question is whether you are strong enough to bear it. His words struck something deep inside me, something I had tried not to acknowledge since the vision that had seared itself into my mind. The woman standing among wolves, the pendant blazing at her throat. My blood remembered her even if my mind did not, and the king seemed to know it. "Tell me," I said, forcing my voice steady. "Who was she?" "The woman I saw." He paused, and for the first time that night, his composure wavered. "A name lost to most," he answered, his tone low. "But not to me. She bore that pendant long ago when humans and wolves fought side by side. She stood against darkness when others fled. She bled in battles where courage was worth more than life." My chest tightened. "And you knew her?" His gaze sharpened. "I fought beside her. I watched her defy fate itself." A shadow passed over his expression. "But mortals do not last. They burn brightly, then fade. And with her fading, so did the bond between our kinds." The weight of his words pressed against me harder than the force he had unleashed earlier. I was not simply enduring this night. For my own survival, I was carrying the ghost of something much greater, something that had been lost and forgotten. "She gave me this pendant," I whispered, "more to myself than to him. Or maybe she passed it down, hoping someone would remember." His eyes narrowed. "And now it rests with you. The question, human, is whether you are her echo or her shadow. Will you rise to the same fire or crumble as most of your kind would?" Before I could answer, the air shifted again. This time the force did not press me to the floor, but pulled at me in every direction, as though unseen hands sought to tear me apart piece by piece. My cry tore from my throat before I could stop it, every nerve alight with pain. I fell to my knees, clutching the pendant, certain that this was the moment that would break me. But beneath the agony, the pendant flared hot against my palm. Images surged behind my eyes, wolves howling beneath a blood-red sky. The same woman standing tall despite her wounds, her hand raised high as though commanding both beast and man. Her voice echoed faintly, "Stand, the bond is not broken." With a surge of will I didn't know I possessed, I forced my body upright again. My legs shook, sweat poured down my skin, but I rose. The force tugged at me harder, threatening to rip me down. But I dug my nails into my palm until blood slicked the silver. "I will not fall," I gasped. The pressure snapped away like a string cut loose, leaving me staggering but standing. My vision cleared, and I found him watching me with eyes wide and burning. The surprise there no longer hidden. For the first time, I thought I saw something else to respect. "You should not be able to endure this," he said, his voice rougher now. "And yet you do." I forced a weak smile through the ache in my chest. "Maybe I'm not just fragile flesh after all." His gaze held mine, long and unflinching. Then, quietly, he said, "Perhaps the night does not test only you. Perhaps it tests me as well." The words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. And I knew then that the trial was not only shaping me, it was shaking him too. The bond between past and present, human and wolf, memory and reality, was pulling us both into its fire. The embers hissed softly behind me. The stars wheeled above the window. The night was not over, and dawn felt impossibly far away. But in his eyes, and in the heat of the pendant, I felt the stirring of something more than survival. Something ancient, something waiting to be awakened. And I knew that before the sun rose, both of us would be changed forever. The night stretched on like an endless road, each moment heavier than the last. My body ached with fatigue, yet my heart refused to falter. The pendant still pulsed faintly against my skin, as though it carried a heartbeat of its own, urging me onward. I stood in the Alpha King's chamber, every nerve alive with the weight of what had already been endured. But knowing the final test had yet to come, the Alpha King paced the length of the room, his cloak trailing behind him like a shadow too heavy to be lifted. His movements were slower now, less like a predator circling prey, and more like a warrior preparing for a battle he could not avoid. His eyes flickered toward me often, not with mockery or dismissal as they had at the start of this trial, but with something more complicated, something unsettled. You have lasted longer than any human before you, he said at last, his voice carrying a low growl beneath the words. And yet dawn has not yet broken. Survival is measured not in what you endure, but in what you conquer. I swallowed, my throat dry. Then tell me what remains. He stopped pacing, turning toward me with a gaze that pierced like steel. The last trial is truth, to face not only my strength, but the reflection of your own. What you see may save you or destroy you. Before I could ask what he meant, the air shifted once more. The fire in the hearth dimmed until the room was cast into shadow. The walls themselves seemed to tremble, as if something ancient stirred within the very stones. My breath caught in my chest as the chamber dissolved, giving way to a vision that felt more real than the ground beneath my feet. I stood in a forest bathed in silver light. The trees towered high, their branches bending under the weight of frost. The silence was broken only by the sound of distant howls that echoed with both sorrow and rage. When I looked down, the pendant at my chest glowed so brightly it illuminated the snow at my feet. From the shadows stepped the Alpha King, but not as I knew him. His form shifted, first man, then wolf, then something caught between. His amber eyes blazed, not with cruelty, but with a raw, unrestrained power that threatened to consume everything in its path. This is what I am. His voice echoed, though his lips did not move. This is what you have chosen to face. Do you still claim the courage to endure? My pulse thundered, fear clawing at the edges of my resolve. But then another figure emerged from the trees, a woman cloaked in light. Her features familiar, though I had never seen her before. The same woman from my visions, the one the king had spoken of. She looked at me with eyes filled with strength, sorrow, and hope all at once. You carry what I carried. Her voice rang through the clearing, clear as a bell. But the choice is yours, to stand or to fall, to rise or to fade. The air trembled as the Wolf King prowled closer, his presence crushing, overwhelming. My knees threatened to buckle, but I clutched the pendant with both hands, drawing on the warmth that now coursed through it like fire. I am not her, I whispered, though my voice grew louder with every word. But I am not nothing. I will not be broken. I will not fade. Light surged outward from the pendant, spilling across the snow, wrapping around me like armor. The wolf staggered back, his form flickering between beast and man. He snarled, not in fury, but in resistance, as if fighting chains unseen. The woman raised her hand, her figure already beginning to dissolve into mist, then bind the bond again, not with fear, not with blood, but with will. Stand beside him, not beneath him. Her image vanished, and I was left facing the Alpha King alone. His body shook as though torn by war within himself. You do not know what you ask, he growled, his voice strained, raw. Then show me, I answered, stepping closer despite the power radiating off him like fire. Show me the truth of who you are, not the monster, not the executioner. The king. The force between us crackled like lightning, a storm that threatened to consume us both. I felt it pulling at my soul, testing every fiber of my being. And yet I did not step back. I reached forward, placing my hand against his chest where his heart pounded like a war drum. The pendant flared one final time, and with it, the storm broke. The forest dissolved. The chamber returned. The Alpha King stood before me, no longer trembling, his form steady, his eyes wide with something that looked almost like release. The silence stretched. Then he exhaled slowly, the sound deep and unsteady. Dawn approaches, he said, though the edge of his voice had softened. And you still stand. I turned toward the windows, where the first pale streaks of light crept across the horizon. My chest heaved with exhaustion, but I was still upright, still breathing, still alive. The Alpha King's gaze followed mine. He looked at me then, not as prey, not even as a challenger, but as something he had not expected to find a survivor, perhaps even an equal. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a vow. You have my word, human. Your life is yours. But know this, what you have awakened tonight cannot be undone. The sun broke over the mountains, gilding the chamber in gold. And in that moment, I realized survival was not the end of my story, it was only the beginning.